Welcome to Faith in the Fog. My name is Isoken Aderile. On this YouTube channel, I speak about midlife, perimenopause, and how women can navigate through this season of incredible change through wellness, science, and from a faith perspective. In today's video, I am going to speak about women in midlife and imposter syndrome. I encourage you to stay with me all the way to the end because this is an interesting topic. I know that many of us women who navigate imposter syndrome throughout the different seasons of our lives, and I want to pay particular attention to women in midlife and how imposter syndrome could show up. Very recently, I was watching a YouTube video and this lady was being interviewed about her experience from a corporate perspective, but also from building a new business. And I found that video so fascinating. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. So this lady had been a country manager in Liberia. And in her role, she had obviously been in corporate for 25 years, and she had navigated the rungs of leadership. She was at the top of her career, so to speak, leading a finance function in this organization. So she was doing really well. But at some point in her early 50s, I think she had either just turned 50 or was in the early part of her 50s, and life for her changed. And that change involved sort of moving back to Nigeria and then having to start life over again. And what was fascinating about this YouTube video was that she was talking about what she started again and what she was doing. So she started again. She was basically, her back was against the wall and she had to start all over again. And she started again by selling fufu. Now, I don't know if you know what fufu is. Fufu is a staple in West Africa. There are different types of things that are called fufu, but in this particular instance, she was speaking about fufu made out of cassava. So I want you to think about this, right? This is a woman who had led an organization. She had led a finance function, and then she had to start her life all over again and had to start at the bottom, starting selling fufu. Now, when you have sort of hit the peak of your career and you're having to start all over again, nobody really thinks about starting all over again from the bottom, right? Starting from absolutely nothing and having to build something up. But she was sharing with us in this video how in the course of just a few years from selling fufu, she had created 11 products that she was selling globally. She had a number of international certifications and she was just getting started, right? She was sharing with us that she was simply getting started with her dream. But one of the things that stood with me, or stayed with me, should I say, as she was relaying her story, was that she reflected on when she was in corporate and the top of her career, so to speak. She felt like a fraud, like an imposter, and she felt like she would be found out at any minute. Now, these are my words, my paraphrasing of my understanding of what she shared. But she did not feel, again, my paraphrasing, but she did not feel like she had earned her place, right? She had earned her place. She was accomplished, she was educated, she knew what she was doing, but she felt like she would be found out. And then to contrast that with how she described herself in this current season of building, where she is building, but she is so confident, she's so authentic, she is fully herself. And I've been reflecting on that story for many weeks, and that's what I want to talk about today, about women in perimenopause, women in midlife, and how imposter syndrome can show up. So what we find, or at least what the data shows, is that for many women, I think we've been socialized to not speak about our achievements and not speak about what we can do or what we've accomplished, right? But also for many of us, I believe that we only feel comfortable or confident showing up when we know everything about a particular topic. And when we don't know everything about a particular topic, maybe we feel like an imposter. But there are even instances where you know you're the absolute expert in your field. You know everything about everything in that particular subject. You've built things, you've raised families, you know how to navigate difficult circumstances, and yet you may still feel like an imposter. There's a book that I recommend to people in the workplace. I really love that book. I've read it maybe about 5 or 6 times, maybe even more. I try to read it every year, and it's called How Women Rise. And in this book, they speak about, women's habits over time, where women have learned, and I say we've been domesticated or trained, where we've learned to minimize our accomplishments, deflect credit. We're hesitant to claim sort of the achievements that we've made. I mean, sometimes we talk about it in work, right? That, you wish you had the confidence of the average man who would put himself forward for something that he's not even qualified for, and he would get it, right? So this is how imposter syndrome shows up in women, right? That through the habits that we've developed over our lifetime, especially in work, where a woman, as an example, a woman will not show up or apply for a job until she's confident that she knows everything about that job and she's an expert in that job. And so we've been domesticated, socialized even, to minimize, deflect, minimize our accomplishments. And you'll find that women will generally only show up if they're 110, 120% confident that they know everything about that topic, and will not venture out until they're wholly confident about what they know. And this shows up even more so in midlife, right? Because we're in a season of shifting identities. And in that shift, I believe that for some women, that sense of, or that voice of imposter syndrome can be very loud. Now, why am I talking about imposter syndrome and midlife? And what does perimenopause have to do with imposter syndrome? Surely perimenopause is not the cause of everything. And I say this clearly, it's not the cause of everything, but it's a season where so many things are showing up that it's important that we have a lens and language to be able to identify what's going on to help us, right? So what is the direct relationship between perimenopause and imposter syndrome? Now, hear me, I'm not saying there's a direct relationship, but what I will say is that with the hormones that are declining, especially estrogen, this is the hormone that has a direct relationship with our memory, our mood, verbal recall. And so you might find yourself highly accomplished. You're in the middle of a presentation and you've forgotten your words. Or you are, maybe like me, showing up on YouTube, you're doing something that you're uncomfortable doing and talking about a topic that you only know maybe a little bit anecdotally, right? What do I know about perimenopause? But the feelings of being an imposter can show up. Estrogen's declining, I'm doing a high stress activity, which is talking to you guys on YouTube, and then feeling that anxiety and thinking, what do I actually know about this topic? These are ways in which the imposter syndrome, that voice in our head, tells us that you shouldn't be talking about this, or you shouldn't put yourself forward to do these things, right? Because you're not qualified. And estrogen's declining, and so of course then we have some issues around cognitive sharpness and anxiety, etc., which then heightens that voice of, hey, you are an imposter, you don't know what you're doing, you're going to be found out. Because for us in midlife, we're in this season of figuring out our identity. Who are we in this next season of life? And if we don't have a framework to address this, that imposter voice can be very loud in our ears. And so, I'm talking about women in midlife and imposter syndrome. I'm reflecting about that woman who told her story going from corporate to starting a business and starting it off really humbly. Now, again, please hear me. I'm not saying there's a direct link between perimenopause and imposter syndrome. I'm just saying that for many women, especially if you've suffered from this in the past, in this season, it might seem heightened. And so my goal in this video today is to encourage you as you navigate imposter syndrome, as you navigate these symptoms that come up in perimenopause, anxiety, overwhelm, loss of your sense of identity, to understand that there are ways that you can navigate this. Now, I talk about these topics from a lens of faith, so I will bring in a faith dimension here. This woman, I'll start again with the woman who set up this business selling fufu. You wouldn't think that somebody who had started or run a business or run a function even from a finance perspective will think that the thing I'm going to start to do as a business is to sell fufu. But I want to tell you how the two can be connected. I've been thinking about stories in the Bible related to women. I'm particularly, in this season, I'm particular about understanding how women navigated life from a biblical lens. And one of the stories that has resonated with me or sat with me is the story in the Old Testament about a widow and the jar of oil. And she met with a prophet. So the story can be found in the book of 2 Kings, and it's in chapter 4. Now this widow, she's a widow, so her husband has passed away. She's got children. They had a lot of debts, and the debtors were coming to her to reclaim the debt. And in fact, it was so bad that her sons would have been sold to pay off this debt. And so she goes up to the prophet and says to him, I have this dilemma, I have a problem, how do I solve it? And so he speaks to her and says, well, what do you have in your house? Let's keep that, we're going to come back to this point. But he says to her, what do you have in your house? And she's a bit, I look at her response and I think it's a little bit dismissive, but she's like, I have nothing. The only thing I have is this little jar of oil, and it's not even enough for us to do anything with it, right? It's a little jar of oil. And he says to her, okay, this jar of oil, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to your neighbors. You're going to borrow some big vases, right? You're going to get as many as you can. And when you come back, you're going to fill all of these vases with oil. And so she goes out to her neighbors and she borrows as many vases as she could. She comes back home and she's in her room because the prophet says to her, go into the room, lock the door, don't let anybody know what you're doing. And so she goes into the room and starts to fill all of these vases from this little jar of oil. And the oil only stopped when she ran out of vases. Now, when I sit and think about it, something that was so little, she just had a little bit of oil, and out of that little she was able to get a whole lot, and then she sold all of the oil. She was able to pay off her debt from the proceeds, and then she had more than enough to live on herself and her sons. And so I take it back to the lady who, after she had a fulfilling career, had to start life again, she started with fufu. This is what she had in her house. You can reframe it this way. What do you have in your hands? When you're dealing with imposter syndrome, especially in midlife, because we tend to minimize our experiences and what we've done and what we've built and what we've seen and what we've experienced, we sometimes dismiss the things that we have in our house or the things that we have in our hands. And so when we're dealing with imposter syndrome, I want to go back basically to what the prophet had said to her, Prophet Elisha. And he asked her these questions, right? He asked her, what do you have in your house? And so for you, I want you to ask that question. When you get the sense of, I'm not enough, I'm an imposter, I'm going to be found out, everybody's going to discover me and that, who I am, and then there's going to be all of this shame, or you're having to start all over again in your life in midlife. The questions that you have for yourself, and these are questions I'm asking myself as well. What have you built? What have you navigated? Who have you helped? What do you know from your years of doing hard things, of building things, of navigating life? What do you know that cannot be taken away from you? This is how, and it might mean that you have to write things down. You might have to ask other people to help you remember. Again, remember, brain fog, sometimes we have, issues recalling. But it's remembering what you have done, remembering who you are, remembering who you've helped, looking at those things. Because the thing is, you are not a fraud and you're not behind. The wrong question is, am I enough? Are people going to find me out? Oh, I don't know. The right question is, what do you have in your house? What have you built? Who have you helped? And how can you take what you have in your house and how can you use that to help you transition into your next season? For many women, we will find that our season of midlife is the most impactful opportunity to grow, the most authentic season that we will have. Remember, because in our youth, maybe we had things to prove, we had career ladders to climb, we had families to raise, we had so many things we're doing, trying to prove ourselves. The blessing of this season is we can be authentically ourselves. We don't have to prove anything to anybody, but we shouldn't dismiss what we have learned, built, navigated, experienced. So let's take what we have in our house and in our hand, and let's look at those things and think of them not as, things to be dismissed, but as good stepping stones and building blocks for the future and the next season that we have. So as I leave you today, and as this video comes to an end, I want to challenge you and ask you a question. If somebody you loved looked at you honestly, if they looked at your house and they looked at your life, what would they say that you've built, or you are, or you've navigated, or you've experienced that you have stopped seeing, but they see so much value in? What is that oil in your house that you have stopped seeing? I am learning to value my own experiences, my life experiences, work experiences, the things I've navigated, the things I'm learning in this season. I am learning to value them, and I'm learning to use them as stepping stones into this season and the next that is coming. I hope you found this video useful. I hope you found that it's blessed you. If it's been useful to you, please share this video to friends, women that you know, your sisters, so that we can all learn together in this season. We're not frauds, we're not imposters. We know more than we give ourselves credit for. Please like, follow, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.